The courtroom was filled with murmurs. A frail, elderly woman stood in the defendant's box, her tattered clothes clinging to her thin frame. Her face, worn by years of hardship, remained downcast as the judge read out her charges. Stealing a loaf of bread. A petty crime, yet one that had landed her here, facing a sentence she had no means to fight. The prosecutor's voice rang through the room. She was caught red-handed. This is not her first time. She is a repeat offender, a burden on society. People like her. Enough. A deep, commanding voice cut through the air, silencing the room. All eyes turned toward the man who had spoken. Tall, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, his presence alone radiated power. People recognized him instantly. Rohan Malhotra, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. But what was a man like him doing here, in defense of a beggar woman? The judge adjusted his glasses. Mr. Malhotra, do you have something to say? Rohan's gaze didn't waver as he stepped forward. Yes, I will pay her bail. She will not go to prison. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The beggar woman looked up at him, confusion and disbelief etched on her face. Why would a man like him save someone like her? The judge hesitated. Mr. Malhotra, are you aware of what you're saying? This woman has been caught stealing multiple times. What interest do you have in this case? Rohan's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. Let's just say, I have my reasons. The tension in the room thickened. Journalists whispered among themselves, trying to piece together the puzzle. Some speculated it was an act of charity. Others wondered if the woman had some unknown connection to him. Then came the moment that truly shook everyone to their core. Rohan turned to face the woman, his voice steady but filled with something deeper, something personal. You're coming. With me? The woman flinched. What? I'm taking you home, he said, his words sending another shockwave through the courtroom. From today, you will live in my mansion, not as a servant, not as a guest, but as my mother. A stunned silence fell over the room. People looked at each other, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. A beggar woman. His mother? How was that possible? Tears welled in the woman's eyes. You must be mistaken, sir. I don't know you. Rohan exhaled softly. But I know you. His voice was quieter now, but no less intense. You may not remember me, but I remember you. Years ago, when I had nothing, you were the only one who gave me something. A piece of bread, a kind word, a moment of warmth when the world had turned its back on me. You may have forgotten, but I never did. The judge cleared his throat, clearly unsettled. Mr. Malhotra, are you sure about this? Rohan's eyes didn't leave the woman's face. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. The woman's hands trembled as she stared at him, searching his face for something. Some sign that this was real, that she wasn't dreaming. And then, for the first time in years, she felt something she had long forgotten. Hope. The courtroom buzzed with unanswered questions. What would happen now? Would she accept his offer? And most importantly, why did a billionaire go to such lengths for a woman the world had already discarded? Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The murmurs in the courtroom refused to die down. Reporters whispered furiously, trying to process what had just happened. The judge, still visibly shaken, finally banged his gavel, calling for silence. Very well, he said, adjusting his glasses. If Mr. Malhotra insists on taking responsibility for this woman, then the court sees no reason to deny his request. The case is dismissed. The beggar woman, still frozen in shock, stared at Rohan as if he were an illusion. She wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. This man, a billionaire, was claiming she had once helped him. But how? When? The guards unshackled her hands, and she rubbed her wrists as she hesitantly stepped toward him. She had spent years feeling invisible, just another forgotten soul on the streets. Now, the most powerful man in the city was saying she meant something. Rohan turned without a word and started walking. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, as if pulled by some unseen force, she followed. Outside the courtroom, chaos erupted. Reporters shoved microphones in Rohan's face. "Mr. Malhotra, what's your relationship with this woman? Is this a publicity stunt? Are you really taking her home?" Rohan ignored them all. His driver was already waiting with the car door open. He turned slightly, looking at the woman. "Get in." She glanced at the sleek black car, hesitating. She had never even touched something so expensive, let alone ridden in it. But something in Rohan's voice told her this wasn't an offer. It was a decision already made. Slowly, she climbed in, feeling completely out of place against the luxurious, leather seats. The car pulled away, leaving behind the crowd of reporters still shouting questions. For a while, there was only silence inside the car. The woman stole nervous glances at Rohan. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His sharp jawline, piercing eyes, the way he carried himself with quiet authority. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't understand." Rohan leaned back, staring out of the window. "You don't have to." The answer unsettled her even more. "But why? Why me?" He exhaled, as if debating whether he should even answer. Then, without looking at her, he said, "Do you remember a starving boy outside a temple 20 years ago? A boy you gave half a piece of bread to?" Her breath caught in her throat. She searched her memory. So many hungry faces, so many hands she had seen reach out over the years. But a temple, a starving boy. And then it hit her. A rainy evening. She had been sitting near a temple, shivering in the cold. A small boy, thin, dirty, with hollow eyes, had been curled up near the steps, too weak to even beg. She had barely had enough for herself, but something in his eyes had broken her. She had torn the little stale bread she had left and pressed it into his hands. She had never seen him again. Until now. Her eyes filled with tears. "That boy was you?" Rohan finally turned to face her. Yes, a sob escaped her lips. She had never imagined the boy would survive, let alone become the man sitting beside her now. She covered her mouth with trembling hands. I didn't know." Rohan's expression didn't soften. "Of course you didn't. Because you never expected anything in return." She nodded, unable to speak. The car pulled up in front of an enormous mansion. The gates opened automatically, and they drove through a long driveway lined with trees. The woman could only stare. She had seen places like this on television, but never up close. When they stopped, Rohan stepped out first. She hesitated before following, her bare feet making no sound against the polished marble floors. Servants gasped when they saw her. "Sir, who is this?" one of them asked hesitantly. Rohan's reply was calm but firm. "From today, she will live here." The woman felt their eyes on her, some confused, some disapproving. She clutched her ragged shawl tighter around her, feeling smaller than ever. Rohan led her through the vast hallways without another word, finally stopping in front of a large door. He pushed it open, revealing a bedroom larger than anything she had ever seen. "This is yours now," he said simply. She shook her head, stepping back. No, this is too much. I can't." He arched an eyebrow. "You slept on the streets for years. You can't sleep in a bed now?" Tears filled her eyes again, but this time it wasn't just shock. It was fear. "I don't belong here," Rohan sighed, as if expecting this reaction. He stepped closer, his voice quieter now. You don't have to feel like you belong. Just stay. She looked up at him, still searching for some sign that this was real. But why? His gaze darkened. Because it's time the world repaid its debts. There was something in his voice, something deeper than just gratitude, something unresolved. And in that moment she realized this wasn't just about her kindness all those years ago. There was more to his story, more to his pain, and whatever it was only just beginning. The woman stood in the grand bedroom, her fingers clutching the edge of her tattered shawl. Everything around her, the soft glow of the chandelier, the heavy silk curtains, the neatly made bed, felt too far removed from the life she had known. It felt unreal, like a strange dream she was bound to wake up from. Rohan stood by the doorway, watching her carefully. His face, always unreadable, held something deeper tonight. He had brought her here, given her shelter, and yet, a part of him seemed unsettled. She swallowed hard. Rohan, is there something you're not telling me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned and walked to the balcony, staring out into the darkness beyond the mansion's gates. She hesitated before following, stepping beside him. The world only sees me as a businessman, he said finally. A self-made millionaire, but no one knows the truth. He let out a slow breath. No one knows what it took to get here. She watched him closely, sensing the weight of his words. I wasn't just an orphan, he continued. I was left to die, beaten, ignored, thrown away like I was nothing. I learned early on that kindness is rare, that people only care when they can use you. His voice grew colder. But you were different. You had nothing, yet you still gave. And for years I told myself that if I ever found you again, I'd repay that debt. He turned to face her, his dark eyes searching hers. That's why you're here. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had spent her life believing she was forgotten, that her existence didn't matter. And yet, this man, this powerful, untouchable man, had carried her small act of kindness in his heart for all these years. But why does it still feel like there's something missing? She asked softly. Rohan clenched his jaw. For the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability behind his hardened exterior. Because kindness alone didn't get me here, he admitted. I had to fight. I had to become ruthless. And sometimes, I wonder. He exhaled. I wonder if I lost a part of myself along the way. She reached for his hand, her touch hesitant but firm. You didn't lose yourself, Rohan. She whispered. You just built walls around who you really are. But deep down, you're still that boy, the one who knew what hunger felt like, the one who never forgot. Something in his face shifted. The weight he carried, the years of survival, the battles he had fought, seemed to press down on him all at once. For the first time in years, Rohan Malhotra, feared by his competitors, admired by millions, felt something unfamiliar. Peace. A single tear slipped down the woman's cheek. Thank you, she said, her voice shaking, for not forgetting me. Rohan let out a breath, one that felt like he had been holding for a lifetime. No, he said. Thank you for making me remember. As the night stretched on, the world outside remained unchanged. The city still roared, the streets still moved. But in that quiet moment, in a grand mansion filled with everything money could buy, a man and a woman, once strangers, now bound by fate, finally found what they had both been searching for. Home.